Today, we're putting 3 seriously impressive AI video generators head to head. And these aren't just random tools I found online. They're backed by some pretty major names. And the kind of realism they can produce is honestly getting kind of wild. We're talking detailed environments, realistic movement, crazy camera shots, and prompts that can turn into something way more cinematic than you'd expect. But instead of me just picking a favorite and calling it a day, we're actually going to put all 3 through the same kind of challenge and see which one holds up. I'll be testing 4 different levels of prompts on every tool, starting simple and then pushing things a lot further. And by the end, I'll tell you which one I think comes out on top. But honestly, my pick isn't the whole point here. I want to know what you guys think. So while you're watching, keep an eye on the results and drop your winner in the comments. All right, enough talking. Let's get into the actual tests. One quick thing before we start though. None of these tools are completely free. You can still test them out with a few prompts using the credits they give you. And a lot of these platforms refresh some credits on a daily basis. So that's usually enough to mess around and see what they can do. Then, if one of them really works for what you need, you can always look at its paid plan later. I've also put the relevant resources in the link in the description, so you can check those out while you're testing. Let's kick things off with tool number 3, Google Flow. First, just search for Google Flow in your browser and make sure you're opening the official site. Then log in and we can get straight into the first test. For this one, I want to start with something that should really show us how well it handles movement and a first-person camera. The prompt is first-person view of a horse race happening at insane speed across a massive beach, with 2 or 3 riders racing alongside, huge waves crashing close to the track, and loose sand hitting the camera lens. And yeah, this one actually looks really clean. The camera movement feels pretty natural. The beach has a ton of detail, and the way the water and sand are moving gives the whole shot a much more believable feel. It doesn't just look like a bunch of stuff was thrown into the frame. There's a real sense of motion here. Now let's make things a little more intense. For the second test, I'm using first-person view from inside a high-performance hypercar flying through an extremely narrow mountain road with brutal acceleration, hard braking, tight cliffside corners, and a huge valley far below. Okay, this is a totally different kind of challenge. We've got speed, sharp turns, a massive drop, and a lot happening around the camera at once. And Flow handles it pretty well. The road stays detailed while everything in the background moves past quickly, and the perspective makes the shot feel surprisingly immersive. All right, we're not slowing down yet. Test number 3 is a dirt bike ripping through a rough, rocky canyon, with the suspension bouncing hard, rocks getting thrown toward the camera, huge jumps, and some really tight turns. This one is probably the most chaotic shot so far, and that's exactly why I wanted to test it. There's a lot of movement packed into this scene, but the video still keeps a pretty convincing sense of depth and speed. The rocks, jumps, and camera shake all work together really nicely, and the overall quality is seriously solid. Now for the final flow test, I wanted something that could really push the scale of the environment. So here's the prompt. First-person view from a helicopter flying at extreme speed through a gigantic mountain canyon, barely clearing the rock walls before suddenly climbing above a huge open valley. And this one looks sick. The transition from that tight canyon into the massive valley gives the shot a really cool sense of scale. You go from feeling boxed in between the mountains to suddenly seeing this enormous landscape open up in front of you. The motion is smooth, the environment has plenty of detail, and for a generated first-person shot, this came out looking way better than I expected. Alright, now let's move over to tool number 2, Vibes AI. One thing I like right away is that it generates 4 variations at once. So instead of waiting around and running every idea separately, you get multiple results to compare pretty quickly. And this one is from Meta, so I'm definitely curious to see how it handles these more demanding prompts. Let's start with the first one, First-person view inside a high-performance car drifting around a twisting mountain road at extreme speed, with the tires sliding just inches from the barriers, while smoke and bits of debris fly past the camera. Okay, this is a pretty strong opening. The drifting motion gives the shot a lot of energy, and the way the car moves around those tight corners makes the whole thing feel fast, without turning into complete visual chaos. You can also see the smoke and debris adding extra movement around the frame, which makes the scene feel a lot more alive. Now let's switch gears completely. For the second generation, I'm going with a close-up wildlife scenario. Ultra-realistic first-person encounter with a huge tiger slowly stepping out from thick jungle vegetation, moving toward the camera with intense eye contact, subtle breathing, and detailed fur movement. And wow, this is a really different test. There's no crazy vehicle or massive action sequence here, so the little details matter way more. The tiger's face, the fur, the breathing, and especially that slow movement toward the camera are what sell the shot. This is the kind of prompt where you can tell pretty quickly whether the model can actually handle realism instead of just throwing a bunch of motion on screen. Alright, test number 3 is going straight back into chaos. I'm using a first-person front seat roller coaster shot where the ride launches through huge drops, upside-down loops, tunnels, and close call sections with strong, realistic camera shake and motion. And this one is wild. There's so much happening from the first second that the camera really has to keep up. But that's also what makes it fun to watch. The movement feels intense, the perspective gives you that front seat feeling, and the camera vibration adds a nice bit of realism instead of making everything look completely static. Now we've got one final test for Qwen AI, and I wanted to go big with this one. The prompt is a first-person view from inside a fast helicopter flying alongside several other helicopters through huge mountain ranges, with the group constantly changing altitude and formation while clouds rush past. This is probably my favorite type of shot to test because there are multiple moving subjects, a huge environment, changing perspective, and a lot of depth all at once. And honestly, Vibes does a pretty good job here. The helicopters give the scene some real scale, the mountains make the background feel massive, and the moving clouds help sell the speed. So far, this one is definitely making the comparison more interesting. Alright, now we're at the final contender, and this one is Qwen AI. It's a Chinese AI platform, and after seeing what the other two could do, I'm really curious whether Qwen can actually take the top spot here. So let's put it through the same 4 tests. For the first one, I'm going with a fighter jet flying insanely low through a narrow canyon, with the rock walls rushing past at crazy speed, followed by a sharp banking maneuver and a quick climb straight into the sky. And this is a pretty strong start. The sense of speed is immediately there, especially with those canyon walls flying past so close to the camera. Then, when the jet suddenly banks and climbs, it gives the whole shot a really nice change of pace. The scene feels dynamic without needing a ton of extra stuff happening. Now let's switch from a jet to something much closer to the ground. The second prompt is a first-person view of an adventure motorcycle racing along a rough coastal trail, with huge ocean cliffs on one side, dirt and rocks getting kicked up, plus aggressive jumps and tight turns. And yeah, Qwen is doing a solid job with this one too. The coastal environment looks really detailed, and having that massive drop right beside the rider makes the shot feel way more intense. I also like the amount of movement here. The bike is bouncing, the terrain is changing, and you've got dirt flying around the camera, so it doesn't feel like a basic generated road shot. Okay, now for test number 3. We're taking this straight into the ocean. The prompt is a first-person speedboat racing across crystal-clear deep water when a gigantic whale suddenly breaches right beside the camera, sending a huge wave of water across the entire scene. And this one is a pretty fun test because the model has to handle both speed and a sudden surprise event. The whale coming out of the water gives the shot a big visual moment, and that splash adds a ton of movement to the frame. The water itself also looks really good here, especially with the reflections and the depth. Definitely one of the more eye-catching generations so far. And now we've got the last Qwen test. This time, I'm going underwater. The prompt is a first-person diver moving quickly through deep blue ocean water when a massive great white shark suddenly emerges from the darkness and swims extremely close past the camera. And honestly, this one has a completely different vibe. You've got that dark open water, the limited visibility, and then suddenly the shark appears out of nowhere. That contrast makes the scene work really well. The underwater environment has a nice sense of depth, and having the shark pass so close to the camera makes the whole thing feel much more immersive. So Qwen definitely came in with some strong results. And now we've got all three tools tested across 4 completely different scenarios. And that's all 3 tested. Honestly, all of them managed to pull off some really cool generations. But if I had to pick one right now, I'm stuck between Flow and Qwen. They both had some shots that looked seriously good, and depending on the kind of video you're trying to make, I could see either one being the better choice. But after going back through all the results, I think I'm gonna give the win to Qwen. The consistency across those different scenes just worked better for me, especially when we started throwing fast movement, detailed environments, and more complicated action into the prompts. That said, I definitely want to hear what you guys think, because you might look at the exact same results and pick Flow instead. So drop your winner in the comments and tell me which one you'd actually use. And if you want to try these tools yourself, I've put the resources and relevant links in the description. If you enjoyed the comparison, hit the like button, subscribe if you're new here, and I'll catch you in the next one.